morning and welcome to today's live Stahls TV class, Sales Compensation Unpacked, how to only pay for results that you get from your sales team. We appreciate all those that have joined us again in another live Stahls TV class. We give about 15 to 20 a month, and we'd welcome you to check out the full schedule at stahlstv.com. And for those of you that are new, welcome to your first presentation. We hope you'll enjoy the class. We have 45 action-packed minutes today, and as always with our Stahls TV classes, you can feel free to type in your questions through the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and Karen will be helping to facilitate the class today and will direct some questions into me at various times during the presentation. So today's topic is sales compensation, and in order to really structure a compensation plan for your sales team, first, you have to have an accurate way to calculate cost to really understand what type of compensation is available to pay out to a sales team, whether that's an in-house sales staff or independent rep, contract rep, whatever it might be. With that, in addition to cost calculation, another critical piece is setting selling prices and having a good strategy to setting selling prices. So while we've covered these topics before on Stahls TV, we're going to spend a little bit of time up front talking about cost calculation and what goes into that and where sales wages and compensation falls as part of cost, and then also talk a bit about strategies for setting selling prices to enable you to really have some funds available to reward a sales team. Now, we only have one additional poll question for you today, and that's really just understanding how many salespeople are on staff at your business. So we'll launch that poll. That'll give me a baseline understanding, and then we'll start into our actual PowerPoint presentation. So Karen's going to go ahead and launch that poll. And if you could take a minute and respond to that. And for those of you just logging on, we welcome you to today's class. Just take a moment and complete that poll. And then give you a couple more seconds, and then let's close off the results. And Karen, if you can share those on air with us.
70% have 0 salespeople, 30% have 1 to 3, and 0% have 4 to 6 or 7 or more. Excellent.
So nice and even numbers. Basically, we're looking at the majority of you don't even have a sales staff yet, and that's typical. We have a lot of small businesses that do business in heat printing, and you're probably either just starting your business or you are the business owner, the production department, the finance department, and the sales department, and we appreciate how you're able to wear those many hats. But let's talk about paying as part of the sales process. So if we can jump over into the PowerPoint. The first thing we're going to cover is our cost calculation basics. And so compensation that works relies on pricing that allows for profit. And to start this off, we want to make sure you have an accurate understanding of all that goes into calculating accurate cost. So you'll see here on the left-hand side, you see the builder, and this is the actual construction worker with the materials to actually build the house. A big part of cost is your direct labor and materials that goes into making the actual item that you're manufacturing. So this would be your production labor time. So if you're using a vinyl cutter, this would be the folks that are actually loading the material on the cutter, weeding, the folks that are heat pressing or direct labor. It contributes to the manufacturing of the product. So if we take our direct labor and materials, and by the way, materials also includes landed cost of materials. That's your transfer, your inks, your blank apparel that you're actually decorating. Everything that goes into that is part of direct labor and materials. We're going to add that direct labor and materials to overhead, and ultimately that's going to equal our total cost of a product to give us our baseline. So this is the very high level view of the equation, if you will, and now let's dive a little bit deeper into each component to make sure you understand it. And as always, Stahls TV classes are recorded and will be posted if you need to review any of this as well for your business. So diving into direct labor and materials, we see on the left-hand side underneath our construction worker, that includes our manufacturing labor and our landed cost of material. So as we're stepping through the calculation here, basically we want to figure out how much labor does that garment cost to complete. And in our top box on the right-hand side, you'll see that we're actually trying to take our labor and get that down to a cost per minute. So if we were talking something like if we were paying somebody $10 per hour to heat print shirts or to weed, if that's our production labor rate, if we take $10 and divide that by 60 minutes in the hour, we're getting a labor cost per minute just short of 17 cents, as you see in the sample there. So if it takes us 2 minutes to heat print a shirt, that's loading it, placing our transfers, everything that's involved in the manufacturing of that shirt. In this case, if we're ordering a screen printed transfer, you can see 2 minutes per shirt is going to have a direct labor cost of 33 cents for the actual labor component, the manufacturing labor. If we take that and add that to our landed cost of material, you can see the landed cost of material in box number 2 on the right-hand side is your garment with freight plus your heat transfer with freight, or whatever goes into the actual cost of manufacturing. So we've given you a sample in a basic apparel order, a price of a t-shirt being $1.99 plus $12.92 in freight for a 36 shirt order. You can see we're basically paying a landed cost per shirt of $2.35. Consequently, we do the math for the transfer calculation, and at the end of it, we get the fact that the transfer plus the shirt costs us $6.51 in our actual landed cost of material, that's shirt and transfer. Add that to our direct labor, and we know we have about $6.84 in total expense for direct labor and materials for this particular calculation. And so the reason we're doing this is a lot of people up front, especially small businesses, don't adequately calculate costs. They don't include the labor calculation, or they don't include freight as a part of expense. So make sure you're paying yourself, if you're doing the labor, for that labor component of the job, just like I'm going to encourage you to pay yourself as part of the sales process once we get to the sales compensation part momentarily. So if that's direct labor and materials, if you remember, the second piece of that was overhead. And overhead happens to include a lot of things, including administrative salaries and sales expense. So we have the cost for accounting and legal expenses. Perhaps the most expensive part of overhead is the rent, especially if you're in a storefront or you have a lease of a dedicated building. And you can see, basically, we're looking to arrive at an overhead rate. So what we have to do in order to arrive at an overhead rate so we can apply cost to every job directly for the overhead component is we need to take our indirect expenses divided by our direct expenses for any given period of time. So let me go through that a little bit more in depth. When we say indirect expenses is the entire list that comprises overhead on the left-hand side. So let's say we take a month out of our company, out of our business, and we know our lease is approximately $500 because we're working out of our home and we're allocating part of our mortgage payment to it. So if our lease is $500, if our sales expense over the course of a month and salaries maybe $1,000, you start to add up all of these components that make up overhead, and that is your indirect expenses for that monthly period. So we put a placeholder number in the sample that says indirect expenses for this particular company were $1,500. Probably a little on the low side, but this is just to do the equation, to do the math. And then we divide those indirect expenses by our direct expenses. So we take that same period of time, if we say the month of November, which we're just completing, if our direct expenses, that's all of the cost of all of our t-shirts, all of our freight, all of our materials that we consumed or ordered during that period of time, and that gives me direct expenses for that period. So in order to get our overhead rate or our overhead percentage, we take that indirect divided by direct, and we end up at an overhead percentage. Now that will allow us to apply overhead to every sale. Now, of course, as you're predicting this overhead rate for your business and coming up with this, you want to take a period of time that is normal for the business. So you don't want an extreme spike. You don't want something that was an extremely slow month for ordering. You want something that's an average for your business. So if you have more history other than a month snapshot, I encourage you take it over a quarter, take it over a year to calculate this overhead rate. So at the end of the day, we take our direct expense, direct cost for any given job, which you remember in our scenario is $6.84, times our overhead rate of 0.15 or 15%, and that gives me my overhead amount for that particular job. So here's where we see that come to life. This is the same lead-in equation for cost calculation. We get our direct labor and materials. It was $684. I take that $684, multiply it by the overhead rate for my business that we just established. That's $1.03, and that gives me a total cost of $7.87. Now, something I want to point out to you is sales expense, as I mentioned, in compensation should be a part of that overhead rate. So if you are currently compensating salespeople or yourself for the function of sales in the business, then basically you already have sales expense built into overhead. So if you're calculating costs in this way, sales compensation is already a part of it, and you basically have positioned yourself well for scale when you start to add salespeople. I think everybody's sort of dream is to hire for their business and expand it. So what I would encourage you to do, if you're just in the infancy of your business, apply sales expense as a part of it up front, because once that's in your overhead calculation, it's very easy for you to scale without you having to weight yourself a bunch of additional sales salaries, especially if you add 1 or 2 sales employees that are dedicated. So this is a quick summary of cost calculation. I know this is pretty complex to consume, but no, we have full dedicated classes on cost calculation on stahlstv.com. And Karen, are there any questions coming in at the moment? All right, everybody's with us. That's good. So once we have an understanding of cost to build this house or to make this t-shirt, then we can start moving to price. And price is obviously key because it ensures profitability for the business. It ensures cash flow. It ensures that you can scale. And basically the doors stay open and you're accomplishing your goals. So with an understanding of cost, we start to look at selling price. And I want to quickly dismiss a couple ways that the industry historically is taught to calculate price or to set price. So this idea of a keystone method, while it's popular in many industries, I believe that it's for a different time and it really leaves profit on the table. So the keystone method, if you're not familiar, it's basically the idea that we would take that cost and we would basically double it for our selling price. And when you start to look at that, across this particular transfer job, we see our cost per piece was $5.35 on the far hand right side for the t-shirt. If we're to use that keystone method, we're selling that t-shirt for $10.70. Obviously, if we're selling to a group of 12, we're probably leaving a lot of money on the table by using the keystone method. Consequently, sometimes the keystone method prices us out of the market. If you look at the jacket on the far hand left side with a cost of $38.28 per 8, selling price of $76.56 may be out of the market. So I'd probably be happy because it takes me virtually the same amount of time to heat print that jacket as it does the t-shirt. There is a little more risk in the process for me to manage if I ruin an item. But the idea here is, why would I be comfortable with $5 profit per piece on the t-shirt for the same amount of time I'm wanting to get $38 profit per piece on the jacket? So I think the keystone method falls a little short. Another thing that falls a little short is markup percentage or gross margin. This is basically establishing a minimum margin rate for your business and applying it to every sale or markup percentage. And what this does, once again, it leaves you short on those lower cost to produce items and really leaves you short across the board, in my opinion, depending on what that margin number is. So what I'd recommend is this doesn't apply across the board, and it's really going to leave you short on profit. This is what I recommend, and most people do this, and that's a market value wins. So in addition to just setting what you think you can sell it for, if you just set what you think you can sell it for, basically there's no real rules or logic to pricing, and you may find that it's tough to duplicate your model and empower your salespeople to really set pricing out in the market and react without having you involved every step of the way, or your finance manager involved every step of the way, which doesn't allow you to scale long term. So if you set up some basic rules and baseline pricing per piece, you'll always leave yourself plenty of profit to pay out compensation, to grow the business, and still deliver back to the business. So in this case, we're basically saying on a t-shirt, we're factoring in a minimum of $10 profit per piece. So if I lock that heat press down, I want to make sure I'm making $10 profit. It doesn't matter if it's a t-shirt or a jacket or a fan jersey. $10 is going to be my minimum markup, or I'm not going to accept the job. And another reason I'm suggesting this, those of you that are small businesses, your time is very valuable. So the last thing you want to do is load up your time for $2, $5 profit per piece t-shirts when you have X amount of time per day, unless you hire, and you have X amount of time per day available on your heat press, unless you buy more heat presses. So the idea is we want to maximize the throughput and make sure when I'm printing, it's as profitable as it can be. And by setting a profit per piece, really you enable yourself to make a lot of money. Now I would suggest having a couple tiers. $10 isn't going to be the number for everything, but $10 can be a minimum, and then you can set more profit based on the risk involved with a jacket or a fan jersey or performance wear. But the idea here is that it helps you to get pricing correct and make as much money as possible. So with a proper understanding of cost and a proper understanding of how to set prices, now we can move to sales compensation. So this is, you don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. That's the whole concept that I'm trying to present here with our first 15 minutes of the class, is that you need to make sure first we get cost calculation right. Second, we need to get price strategy right. And then thirdly, you really start to look at sales compensation. And so I'd like to dive in specifically into sales compensation and share a few different models that I've come up with that I've seen work in the past, and ultimately you can structure one to fit your business. And so the point you see on the screen there is structure to your objectives. So compensation may look different for every business. Basically, if you have an established base of customers, are you going to hand that off to a salesperson to manage those customers or a select group of those customers? So really understanding what you're asking your salesperson to do up front is important. And number one is, if you have these loyal, repetitive customers that have been doing business with you for X amount of years, odds are, there may be some risk with turning those over to a salesperson and asking them to manage those relationships, because ultimately it's going to tie down a lot of their time when you might want them outselling, establishing new business. So with that in mind, let me flip over to a compensation model here and try to walk you through this. Now, let's see if I can zoom here a little bit. Okay, yeah, this will allow me to walk through piece by piece. So there's going to be a lot of math here, so take a deep breath, and hopefully you're with me so far. There's no questions so far, right, Karen? Okay, so everybody should be with me, and let's go through a couple different models. So basically, I'm going to show you 3 models to structure compensation. One of these, and nothing's on the screen that I'm pointing out right now, I'm just talking. So one of these is a flat rate commission on the actual sale amount, which would be a commission on the total sale. This is a traditional model where we pay X% for the total value of the sale that comes in. Another one would be a growth-based plan where we are rewarding a bonus that can be higher or lower depending on the growth amount, one. And then the last one would be sort of a bonus on growth plus, which factors in a couple key things that I think are important to sales compensation, and that would be individual activity metrics to make sure your sales reps are really contributing to the growth and it's not just happening organically without the participation of a sales rep, which sometimes happens, especially in businesses that have a good brand and are well established in an area and do a lot of marketing. And then secondly, it helps to incorporate the idea of team selling and just the overall company success rather than just individual success, and sort of applying a factor to the bonus to reward for overall company results. And basically that gets your salespeople out from being on an island just working for themselves and working for the ultimate objectives and growth of the company. So let's start. Let me grab color here. Okay. So what we're looking at here is, let me walk you through some assumptions. And we're going to start over in the E column, which is the light orange here on the right side. And basically, we are factoring in what opportunities we're going to deliver to a salesperson. So as a company, you probably have leads coming in, I would hope, whether that's from your website, from your storefront, from your advertising efforts, referral, that you want a salesperson to handle. So the first thing we need to identify is, what does an average customer look like to us, a new customer? What is an expectation of a year one target? And so I put in a placeholder here of $1,250 in sales for the first year. So that would be the first transaction through 12 months that a customer does with us. And what I would recommend is you set that sort of average, or you run it based off of real data for your company on what does an average customer look for. So if an average order is $300 and they place that order 4 times a year, you're looking at an average customer of around $1,200. Okay? So I think that's totally reasonable in our industry. For an average customer, your business may be quite a bit higher. So based on the opportunities that you expect them to work, whether you give them or they independently prospect them, and basically the close ratio. So what this means is, how many did they win versus lost from the opportunities assigned. So if we're saying all these 100 opportunities assigned are going to work through to either close won or close lost over the course of the year, sort of rolling, then we know we expect that sales rep, that individual rep, to gain 36 new customers if my close ratio is 36%. So how many deals do you win? If you bid out 5 new customers, do you win 1? Do you win 2? Do you win 4? So that should give you sort of an idea of what you should expect for a close ratio and a percentage. So this is data that you have to start up front with, and this starts by managing a sales pipeline and really understanding, who am I quoting out to versus who is buying, who have I won, who have I lost, and why. It's a total sales strategy. So if we gain 36 customers in this instance at $1,250, we know my new customer growth target for this rep over the course of a year is $45,000. Once again, this may change for your business. These are simply placeholders. Okay? If I'm not asking that rep to manage any existing business, this number may be a lot higher, because 36 customers over the course of the year isn't a whole lot. That's 3 a month. And if that's all they're doing, I would think they could win more business than that. So, but this one factors in some baseline account assignments. So the idea is, if you don't have any sales reps today and you're looking for a sales rep to manage some existing customers and hopefully provide some growth in them, work them a little more effectively than as if they were unmanaged, I think that's expected. You want some existing account growth here. So we're saying in this scenario we've assigned 35 accounts that you see in C14 here. They have an average starting value of $2,500, so these are established accounts. We should know their value, which 35 times 2,500 equals 87 grand roughly in baseline business. And how much do I expect them to grow those accounts? So we put a 15% growth number on this particular list. It can easily be whatever you want, and basically that will give you your assigned account growth target. So if I take that 15% or $375 per account times 35 accounts, I get an assigned account growth target of 13 grand and change. So all in all, I'm looking at new business plus account management growth for a total annual targeted growth that you see there in A10, which is the cell. Let me highlight it in bright yellow here for you. You'll see that to be $58,125. Number one, that's the growth. If you add that to the baseline business, which was the 87.5 that you remember for the existing customer, the total annual business measured, I'll highlight it in green here, is 145 grand in change. So you can see $145,000 in sales per rep, $58,000 in growth, and you start to get numbers that you can actually compensate and structure compensation off of. We have a question, so I want to stop and take that.
Lou would like to know, when the cost of one item is reasonable but very expensive just to ship it, especially from California to the East Coast, and you can't find the product closer, would you suggest purchasing more of the product, not knowing how long it will take to sell the extra, and take your chance, or order each time when an order is placed?
Okay, good. So that sort of, thanks for the question, Lou. That kind of plays into the whole cost calculation and really more controlling costs, so you leave more profitability and opportunity What I would recommend is, one-off shipping from California is a really tough model, especially if you're on the East Coast or vice versa, because freight is going to bury you and eat up all of your profit. So I would suggest maybe having a stock range of items that has a certain price point, and you expect a certain profit per item based on items that can get to you within a fairly reasonable time frame at a good expense, and you can place a weekly order, something like that, from a local supplier. And then if there's a custom item, it's not like you can't open up your catalog to more items, but I'd probably put a premium on the price, especially if I got to order a one-off and bring that in. And I really don't suggest holding a lot of inventory, especially on blank apparel, because that can eat a lot of profit as well. I think it's better to try to find local suppliers, offer selection from a few suppliers, and sort of group your orders if you can. Any additional questions right now? Okay. So hopefully we understand those targets. So we have the target per inside rep or sales rep, and we have the total annual business managed. And basically, you can say, I want 3 reps on the team, 4 reps, 5 reps on the team, and you can get your total targeted annual growth for the team or individual. And this is just a helpful way to start things. And we can email you this calculator since we're explaining this, and you guys can sort of punch in your own numbers and factors. So let's go to the second tab here, and let's look at that flat commission rate. Now, a report I read said the commission rate in the apparel industry ranges from about 7 to 15% on a sale, and this was a study done in 2012. So 7 to 15% is a pretty typical rate. I know that's a big range, but I think somewhere in that range, if you want to pay flat commission per order, would be totally acceptable. Now, the cool thing about a flat commission rate, it's fairly easy to calculate. I'll zoom in on this for you, but basically you can set up these rates, you can set up your sales territories or assign account ownership, and it's pretty easy to calculate whether you pay it quarterly or monthly. That's up to you. I recommend quarterly because that sort of levels out any peaks and valleys for a sales rep, and it also levels out any peaks and valleys for your company and sort of mitigates risk. And then from a retention standpoint of salespeople, quarterly kind of keeps your salespeople committed and hanging on to get that compensation check at the end of the quarter. And I would recommend writing into your job offer and contract that compensation is paid at the end of the quarter, and basically if a sales rep chooses to jump ship in the interim, that the company isn't liable to reward the compensation. But basically taking our quarterly sales estimate, you remember up in the number 2 here, we had this total managed business by the rep that we just created of 145 grand, and then we're going to break that down to quarterly sales estimates. So we're saying to get them whole, if they produced right on budget for what you set based on that new account value and that 15% existing customer gross, that would be 100% of the budget, and they would hit number. That's what we're looking on the green highlighted cell there in 7. If we paid 7% commission, that's what we would reward. 10%, and you can read on through. Now, if they only hit 60% of their growth target, we'd be looking at row number 6. And I think it's nice to start rewarding at some sort of percentage of the sales target, because it basically, if they're not going to hit their number for that quarter, it keeps the sales rep pushing on through to try to get as much as they possibly can. I would recommend you set a sort of base at 60% or some percentage of the number to get rewarded all, but it keeps them working even if they don't hit full target. And then I'd also allow some upside. So, this particular one is 150% of the sales growth. So if they basically hit 150% of the budgeted growth, you could see the payouts. So the good about this, it's fairly easy to calculate, it's straightforward, it's been done this way for years. The negative about this is that it's very much uncapped, and we're rewarding on business that we've already had established. So if you have a loyal customer that they're managing as accounts, we're basically paying for them to keep that business alive. Now, there may be some reasons for that. You don't want the churn or the customers going elsewhere. You really want them to focus on maintenance of the account. But really, this makes it tough to manage compensation. And sometimes these types of compensation models can really get a very well-paid sales rep, which isn't a bad thing, but it can not work for the company. I've seen it not work for the company in the past. We have a question?
Are you paying commission every time the order is placed after the first order or just initially?
Okay, so that's a good question, whether or not you pay the compensation just on first orders or on all repeat business. That's your call. This is based on all business written in that period. So I am personally an advocate of having, you can structure it one of two ways. If you want it to only be new business, you can have just new business development reps and have them bring business in. I think the challenge with only paying on the first order, though, is it really doesn't speak to a customer-centric plan and really a company-centric plan to set up a good relationship. That sales rep is going to be after as much as they possibly can on their first order. I would at least pay on the first year of a customer for new business, because that's going to keep the sales rep engaged. It's going to keep the sales rep upholding the commitments and the promises they've made, and it's really going to allow the sales rep to build rapport with the customer and perhaps turn them from just a transactional-based customer into a real relationship for the company. And I think long term, you would do a lot better. So this is based on paying for the full life of the customer, which would basically be any order they would place. Any other questions? Good? Okay, so not a bad model, but let me show you one I prefer. So bonus on growth. So if you can zoom in again here. Okay, so this is the same idea, except you see instead of focusing on the $145,000 or whatever the number was in total business, we're focusing on the actual growth target per rep. So when we jump back to that tab 1, remember that we had this annual growth target per rep of 58,125. So if we take that as a growth target per rep and divide that by 4, or 12, depending on whether you're paying monthly or quarterly, you can get down to a quarterly or monthly target of growth. Then what we're doing, rather than having it be these windfall commissions where they can basically make a ton of money if they get one huge sale and then pretty much be made for the year, we are setting something up that works that's a little bit more manageable and contained for the company, but still offers upside for the rep to keep them motivated. And what we've created is a quarterly or monthly bonus amount. In this case, we ran it quarterly for the reasons stated earlier, that I prefer quarterly because it's a bigger window and more indicative of true performance versus the peaks and valleys. So we set up $2,500 as a sort of a placeholder number, thinking that, you know, a 10 grand opportunity over the course of a year in commission for a sales rep in this industry is pretty solid, and there's upside, and you'll see that. So if we look at, and obviously adjust these numbers based on your location and region and existing plans, but if we look at if they hit the full 14,500 in compensation, I'll highlight that in yellow so we can see where I'm at. You can see that the full amount of the bonus is rewarded for that quarter, in this case $2,500. So we hit effectively the same thing that we would have hit in the flat commission rate, but in this rate we're controlling our bonus amount. It's $2,500. Now if they hit 150% of that growth number, down here where it's 21,796, we see they would get 150% of the bonus amount. So rather than having this sort of windfall commission where it's uncontrollable, you know, they can only make a factor of the actual baseline bonus achieved. I'm never a fan of caps on sales reps. A lot of companies will cap a rep. Basically, you hit a ceiling and you can't go any further. I'm much more in favor of controlling sort of the factor or the multiplier on how much they can actually make and structuring the deal right up front. So you can see they would make $3,750. They're saying, Josh, these are big numbers, but when we compare this to our other model, look at this. The commission of sale at the 10%, and I'll zoom in again. The commission of the sale at the full number, which is our middle number here, would have been $3,640 at 10% commission, whereas the bonus on growth is only $2,500. Consequently, if they hit 150% of growth, you can see it's much more controlled versus just a flat commission. And basically we are ensuring that they're seeking new business, looking for additional opportunity with existing customers this way, and also preventing customer attrition or customer decline, because you know what happens if one of your $10,000 customers that you assigned to the sales rep for manage goes away, they don't hit growth until they make that 10 grand up. So it really makes them value the customer relationship, look at the total piece of the pie for the company, and sort of manage the business in the territory or the collection of customers that's assigned. So that is the bonus on growth model, which I'm a big proponent of. The only thing this leaves out is when you start to add in multiple sales reps, and you really, or you have one sales rep that manages all of sales. It can go bad either way. So if you have one rep that manages sales, you really need to set some what's called KPIs or key performance indicators into place as well for them to qualify for the compensation. And basically that means how many sales calls do you want them to make? What is important to the business that they do? Do they need to talk to existing customers once a month? Do they need to make 5 sales calls per day to local business, independently prospect? What other activities do you want them creating? Because if the company just grows organically and it's no help of the salesperson, basically you're going to be carrying some dead weight and rewarding a salesperson that's really not working or showing activity. I'm never a big fan of compensating exclusively off activity. I think the thing you compensate on is actual sales dollars, but if you don't somehow factor in the activity, you could end up with ultimately comfortable or complacent sales folks that aren't contributing to growth and are getting rewarded just because of the success of the company, the territory, whatever it might be. So that's a little guard against that. The other big thing is when you start to add multiple salespeople, I think you want to tie in a company incentive, because I've seen sales sort of compensation plans structured in the past where basically we would lock in a rep and for a specific account, and basically it's finders keepers. And so you'd have reps basically fighting to see who could get to the accounts and territories the quickest, and really, did you talk to them first or did I, who owns this account? And you end up with reps that are sort of working at odds against each other instead of for the company. So here's a little rendition of this bonus on growth that has this plus factor. So basically what you're looking at here is you're looking at the same numbers in this top half of the grid, but let's look at the additions to this. So basically we said, let's say the sales rep hits 100% of the budget and we typed in $2,500 directly into this cell on the bottom. When you start to look at that, basically we added a factored loss. So KPI, meaning key performance indicator, if that particular rep that's eligible for this bonus did not hit their objectives from a call standpoint, their full objectives, basically we can factor in the loss. So if they only hit 75% of their metrics, we can type in a 0.75, and basically it would adjust that bonus down to $1,875. If they only hit 85%, 0.85, and it will adjust it down. So the idea here is that there's a negative incentive that says basically if you're not working for it, your bonus is going to be factored down. Now ultimately, good management would say you're not going to have reps that aren't completing the activities and working for it, because ultimately they'll be let go from the company, but this is a way to sort of let the system manage itself and really put that as a factor that impacts pay, which always impacts performance. Also, we factored in a corporate achievement goal. So if we have 5 territories, and let's say, or 5 salespeople, if all 5 salespeople hit the number, then we have the corporate achievement goal, and you can set that, at a 10% increase on the eligible bonus or whatever you want it to be. So you start to work these 2 factors together, and we have the individual times the corporate achievement onto the bonus amount, and you get a payout that helps to tie the rep more into company and also ties them into individual activity to keep them working hard. So to sort of summarize that thought, basically compensation, I think, should be structured on growth. If you want to have a separate sales group that's account management or have that manage existing accounts, that's always an option. But I'm a big fan of salespeople managing existing accounts because they're going to look for growth opportunities in a different way than somebody that's just taking orders and basically making sure the customer's satisfied. We're really looking for growth opportunities. So I would structure based on growth. I would consider a flat rate bonus, allowing the sales rep to make a factor of it based on excellence or based on only hitting a percentage of budget. And then I would also factor in some sort of individual activity metric and company success metric as you're structuring. But as I said, before you get into compensation, you need to accurately understand cost calculation, accurately set prices, and then these numbers that we're showing in the presentation here will just be a natural part of your cost calculation because they'll all be inclusive when you calculate that overhead rate. And then the business starts to run itself. You have salespeople, you can scale, and ultimately you should be able to land at a salesperson equals this much in revenue, this much in growth, and then you can really strategically plan how you grow the business. Obviously, if you're only doing business in the local area, you can only have so many sales reps flooding some local region. But as you start to expand out, perhaps do business online or into national markets or even international markets, a sales team can really have some big benefits. What questions do we have, Karen? Absolutely no questions? All right, fantastic. So we're right on time. So this will be recorded. It'll probably publish out on Stahls TV tomorrow. The other big thing I want to invite you to is we're giving a heat press buying guide class today. So if you don't have a heat press or if you're looking to add heat presses, I'll be giving that class. It's about an hour. It's right in this room, hands-on with some of the presses, and we'll be showing you what to look for in a heat press. And you can sign up on stahlstv.com, and that'll be from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time today. Thanks for watching Stahls TV. We'll see you next time.